Okay, urban revolution's part of the urbanization unit in human geography. Prior to cities, man was a hunter-gatherer. The development of food storage allowed for the development of cities. The first were very rural, primarily organized around agriculture. The first modern urban settlement is in modern-day Iraq, probably the Baghdad area. Early cities after that were Troy, Crete, and along the major rivers such as the Nile and rivers in China. The first major city was Athens, over 100,000 people, and by the 5th century BC, up to 300,000 people. Then we have the Roman Empire, which led to the term all roads lead to Rome, primarily because that was a way they could control their empire and quickly send their armies to the far-reaching outposts of their empire. Most of the older cities that we think of, such as Paris, London, and Vienna, were originally old Roman city sites. Then we go into a period of the medieval period, also known as the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, after the fall of Rome. Urbanization decreased. The feudalism, the castle tended to dominate and provided everything they needed. We have walled cities with narrow streets, the big castle architecture, and very compact again around the outer walls. Then we have the Renaissance or Baroque cities, which is after the Middle Ages, 15th and 16th centuries, and the 16th through 18th centuries. Developments of wide avenues, monuments. Examples of these cities would be Paris and London were rebuilt during that time. Washington, D.C. was built. Then we come to what we refer to as the second urban revolution, which was based around the Industrial Revolution. This was the 19th century to the present day. Cities were primarily designed around the industry that there was dominant and transportation, and most modern cities have followed that form. We've recently developed, geographers, a term called megalopolis, which is basically when a number of cities grow together or blend together without any separation. A good book by on this topic is The Blob by Lewis Mumford. This has also brought about in the United States what we call the SMSA. There's usually a question about this on the AP exam, which stands for the Standard Metropolitan Statistical Area. Also, 40% of the world's population currently live in urban areas. It's actually a little higher than that now. This slide shows a good example of both a megalopolis and a standard metropolitan statistical area. Up in the right top you have Boston, New York. Down here is the Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia. And if you travel from this area to this area, you virtually, it's one gigantic city, all that has grown together over the years. And for purposes of sampling, although this is broken up into a couple of different statistical sampling areas, it's the area around a market or a city. For example, in Jacksonville, our SMSA is Duval County, and I believe it's the 5 surrounding counties, basically from St. Augustine out to Baldwin, McClenny area. I'm not sure it goes quite as far as Lake City. Then over to Fernandina. That's our SMSA, which is what the government uses for statistical sampling for a lot of different reasons, and so do marketers as well. This next slide graphically shows the megalopolis concept, where again up here you see at night the lights have basically grown together. All those cities literally over the years have grown together. Okay. Urban SMSAs, as I talked about in Jacksonville, London was the first city to go over 1 million with in approximately 1810. When this was put together, there were over 180 cities that now have 1 million people. And here's some of your bigger cities around the world. And Tokyo is currently the largest city. This is a real important concept, central place theory, that is prominent on the AP exam. And it, basically, in a nutshell, it's that you need a threshold in the center of a city to support something. And the theory being that the range that people will travel from the center to something is critical to where you locate something. And this slide shows a couple of things. It shows the little blue dot is United Dairy Farmers. It's a convenience store. And then the red dot is a department store. And the theory goes that a convenience store, you're only going to travel a short distance to a convenience store, whereas you may travel a further distance to go to a department store. So you notice where they have located their stores. The convenience store is basically the little green dot with the circle around it. So they have a very, very small central place because people are not going to travel very far to get a gallon of milk. Conversely, when you look at the red dots for the department store, they're much bigger circles because generally people are going to travel further from a central place to, or range, to get to a department store. And that, in essence, graphically, briefly tells you the concept of central place theory. Okay, urban patterns. Generally, most cities have a city center, which is best known for the most visually distinctive center of the city. Then from examples would be San Francisco and London. And usually this is the original site of where the city was developed or settled. Then from that, and usually in the same general areas, what we call the central business district, also referred to as downtown. This is primarily where your office, retail, governmental space. It's usually accessible by road transport, rapid rail transportation, mass transportation. It tends to be the focal point of the city with size skyscrapers. You would say Jacksonville, right there at the Main Street Bridge where we have the several skyscrapers, would be considered our central business district or the focal point. Again, a lot of specialized stores that cater primarily to office workers. Then we have, moving out from the center of the city, what we call zones in transition, and they can be used for light industry. Sometimes they're transitioning from business to residential, and generally you'll have older neighborhoods in this area, which we refer to as slums. They can be home to ethnic groups that may have settled the city originally, that are not maybe culturally integrated with the rest of the city. And there's a whole unit we're going to cover on ghettos versus ethnic neighborhoods, so I'm not going to get into that now. Then as you move further out from the urban center, you have the suburbs, which are primarily residential with what we call nodes of retail services. As you notice in Jacksonville, you'll have a Publix, some shops and restaurants, and then you go half a block behind there and the residential areas are behind the strips. These are referred to as retail nodes. This graphic shows you again the zones of the pattern of a city. Again, Zone 1, the Central Business District. Zone 2 is the zones in transition, the workers' homes, the better residents or suburbs, and then what we call the commuter zones, which are on the fringe of the city. Growth of cities, skyscrapers. The two things that allowed skyscrapers to be built were the development of steel, the Bessemer process, and elevators, so that we could use vertical space because there's intensive use of the land area because there's not a lot of it in the central city. Generally, the skyscraper has your retail levels on the first floor with the professional offices, in some cases a combination of professional offices and residential at the upper floors of a skyscraper. The outward expansion of the cities. The number one thing that allowed the suburbs and whatnot to develop was the automobile. Prior to that, most people relied on foot travel or whatever, so it tended to be concentrated in cities. But with the advent of the automobile and cheap energy, it allowed outward expansion to the suburbs. Also, during that period of time, primarily in the 50s and 60s, there was a definite decline in public support for public transportation. And in fact, many auto companies and tire companies and whatnot bought up public transportation and dismantled it so that they could support the automobile instead. At this time, when we start seeing primarily more in the developing world, what we call squatter settlements, or where illegally erected shacks, whatnot, that poor people generally left out in the development process have no place to live, so they generally find places to live and build them. Again, it's more common in your third world and developing countries. We also find during this period of time what we call the de-urbanization, which is where the subregions or suburbs become independent cities. Now, here in Jacksonville, that's an exception, but in most cities, you have suburbs that take on a good portion of the legal and service responsibilities of a city. We also have the advent of what we call cluster cities, which are cities that grow up around a major city. And then, of course, we still have in the outer band the rural areas, and a new phenomenon with the advent of the internet and cheap communication is telecommuting, where people can live a significant distance from a major city, but can literally telecommute by internet or telephone and get their work done, and maybe only go into the city 1 or 2 days a week. This shows you, again, the growth of the city, and I believe this is Buffalo, New York, starting in 1900 to 1990. And you'll notice the density in 1900, again, before real use of the automobile, and then over the period of time, over the 90 years, you'll see how the population being concentrated in this core area, each period of time, it gets less and less, and the fringes tend to develop more. And this is sort of a classic movement from a city to a more suburban type layout of the city. Okay, you need to know where cities are located. Generally, developing countries have higher populations living in urban areas because more and more people are moving from rural to urban. Example, the last statistic I read was that 100,000 Chinese move a month from rural areas to one of their cities. 2/3 of the population live in urban areas. Developing countries are going to have the greatest increase in the number of large urban settlements because they're the ones that have probably the largest non-urban population presently. Most of the largest cities are in developing regions. This map is out of your textbook, and it shows you the major cities of each continent. And this next one shows you the relative relationship of your dominant cities, such as New York, London, Tokyo, and then your major cities and your secondary cities. This is an example of a typical developing country marketplace. You'll notice it's somewhat ramshackle. Again, this could be anywhere, third country, USA marketplace. This is another phenomena of the smog effect of major cities. Again, this is in the morning when it's clear, and then as the smog develops, you lose visibility. This is again an example of one of the problems, current problems of urban centers. And that concludes our presentation.